Tonight I was determined to get a decent landing at Courchevel down on video. I'd been watching lots of videos on YouTube today on real aeroplane landing tips and tricks, and was hoping I could apply some of these things to my flight simulator practice landings. I knew it'd be a bit of an uphill battle against my very twitchy Logitech Extreme 3D Pro Joystick, but I reckon if I concentrated on making everything stable and applying very gentle inputs, it was possible to get a decent score. So as expected, the first landing was pretty dodgy. It came in very low, very slow, and added a whole heap of power in a very unrealistic manoeuvre to try and nail that landing spot, and ended up with a pretty mediocre result. The second landing attempt was an improvement on the first in many ways, but I came in a bit slow, and during the transition and flare ballooned the aircraft a bit and dropped fairly hard onto the runway after stalling. But the landing point was probably the most accurate of the evening, so the overall score was quite an improvement on the first attempt. During the next landing attempt, some things were starting to come together. I was managing to be a little less twitchy on the joystick and was feeling fairly good about the transition and flare. But I was fishing around a lot for the centre line on late final and ended up landing a bit heavier than I would like on the left wheel first. So the score was an improvement, but still had a bit of a way to go to get to that 1.5 million. For the next landing attempt, I was determined to break that 1.5 million. Get lined up, well out, nice stabilised approach, constant speed, focusing on that aiming point right at the end of the runway. So all I had to do was transition very gently, avoid the balloon, and let the plane ease itself down onto the runway. Most of this worked out okay, but I still was hitting the runway too hard. 182 feet per minute was not going to cut it. So here's the final landing attempt in full. I'll accelerate through that protracted base leg, but even there I was trying to keep the aircraft stable, keep the descent rate at a fairly constant 500 feet per minute, and try and pitch for about 85 knots. On the turn to final, I overshot the runway a little bit, but nothing too drastic. I concentrated mainly on keeping the airspeed stable and kept a bit of an eye on that descent rate. As I turned out onto final, I kicked in the last notch of flaps and concentrated hard on trying to pitch for 75 knots, keep the airspeed stable, focus on that aim point just short of the runway, and make very minor corrections trying to keep on the centre line. If I got that right, the aircraft would fly itself down nicely onto the runway. The transition and flare were pretty stable, a little bit of twitching just before the end, but managed to get it back under control just before touchdown. And we managed to nail that 1.5 million score. It wasn't my most accurate landing precision or my best ground roll, but overall it was the best landing of the evening.